Hey, everybody, back again. Going to be doing this Birdman today from the Hanna-Barbera 1960s cartoon series. Um, Bear with me a second here. Going to do the whole log over to the page thing so everybody can follow. And just want to make sure it's shared up. And there we go. All right, yay us. Okay, this is one of my favorites from the late 60s. Of course, I had to watch these in syndication, just like most of us, because it's a little before my time. But um, growing up in the 80s, man, I tell you that this was one of my favorite syndicated cartoons. And then when they came back out in the early 80s with the new Hanna-Barbera runs, I tell you, man, I was just all over it. It was crazy. Um, Loved these things, still do, and they still hold up till today. I mean, even though they're monochromatic and one-toned, and not as dynamic as some of the stuff is that's out now. The funny thing is that they still hold up for superhero story stuff. They still hold up. I mean, it's good versus evil. There's no question about what you're getting. It's just simple escape entertainment. You can watch it, have fun with it. The characters look great, and it's just an awesome entertain me type of thing. As I was going to say, with the impact of the now generation coming back, you know, um, it was perfect timing for those cartoons to get a nostalgic feel. I hear from people all the time, they think they know inside and out with these. A lot of hipsters uh, are popular, with these things, and vice versa. And it's funny because I saw a couple of people going to plan for the Comic Con coming up on oh geez, um, Oklahoma City is having a Oklahoma Wizard Con, and they're coming back down for the first time in I think 6 years, something like that. And I heard they're coming in October, and I may be making an appearance because that is a local show that I can definitely make. Um, I have to check my schedule. I may be making a local comic appearance, which I hardly ever do because I'm so swamped. But that one is local, and I may be able to, get something going, and might even be able to do a couple of cards from con. That would be cool. Um, get to hang out with some of my friends and stuff that I haven't seen in a long time, and go from there. But I make no promises. So I'm going to look into it this week and see what my schedule looks like, and see what I can maybe wrangle up. So, but anyway, yeah, I've heard a bunch of people going to Comic Con here pretty quick, and there's a lot of the local what they call retro cartoon groups, and it's basically hipsters, plain and simple. You guys own up with what you are. It's fine. If that's your gig and your stick, go for it, own it. But there's a couple of these guys that are actually going to be using the old Hanna-Barbera cartoons and from the '60s versions, and they're going to be doing a bunch of cool stuff going on with these characters and a couple of others from that time period, which I find really fascinating. Uh, I'm all about it. I geek out about this stuff. Uh, I still see people at Halloween in a really good costume, and it just makes me a kid all over again because it's just like, really, that's friggin' awesome. But I geek out just like everybody else. But yeah, they're going to be doing. I know for a fact a Space Ghost is going to be there. I know a couple of the guys are doing the Herculoids, at least a couple, and they're doing some um, some of the funnier stuff, like the Flintstones and things like that. And there's always those characters sticking around, uh, but it's going to be cool nonetheless to see some of these heroes actually come to life. And I hope everybody makes it in their cons, uh, their con appearances work out. But you never know. I mean, people are fickle like that. You could get out there, and I've seen a lot of cosplayers ripped apart just as badly as mediocre artists coming out and getting ripped up. And that's just one of those things. I hope it comes back, because I would like to see, even with Future Quest not being a book that I pick up and read. Um, Sorry, DC fans, I just don't. I don't want to risk damaging the longevity of the characters that I am a fan of from the old school days, and not wanting to bust that bubble. So I don't pick those books up. I do follow some of the Scooby Doo stuff. It looks pretty funny, but not the comic books, but the new cartoons. I follow those pretty religiously, because I'm just an old hat Scooby Doo fan. I love those cartoons, and they never get old as long as they stick with the original concept and not get too far off. And I'm thinking the comic book may lean that way, unfortunately, which kind of sucks, but it is what it is. So, I had somebody pointed out to me yesterday that my Tor's mask looks kind of like a Batman mask, and then another friend told me this morning that she thought that it looked like the bat signal. And I find that funny because, in the 60s, that's when Batman was popular with the spoof series, the Adam West spoof series. And then you had this character come along, and he's got the Wolverine thing going on with the black visors and the yellow hood, which is ironic because his mask is yellow, black, and blue, like the original Wolverine suit. Kind of ironic there, but not saying anything, because there's only so many designs you can put on a human form. And the funny thing about that is that it came across as a big thing in the 60s. I'll pull this out and show you guys. That mask was everywhere in the 60s because of the fact that, Batman was the thing, and this mask creeped the crap out of everybody. I mean, plain and simple. That's exactly what happened there. That's where it came along from, and that's where it's, going to stay. It's just a creepy mask. That black visor is just, it does the job. So in any incarnation of what's going on with it, it still holds up till today, this very moment. And that's why that costume, even over the years, with all the changes of all the characters and the adaptations, the mask and cowl of Batman pretty much stayed the same throughout every incarnation of him, period. And I find that fascinating that they went off and did that, and throughout all the changes in the years, Bill Finger's original design really holds up. So, and yes, I said Bill Finger and not Bob Kane. If you think that Bob Kane designed Batman, you're wrong. That's one of those things where he gets listed finally at the end of Batman versus Superman because of that. So, take that with with what it is, with a grain, as it is Bill Finger that created him, not Bob Kane. It was originally Bob's idea, but everything about pretty much every major character in that thread is from Bill. And I am a high-end supporter of that because he got ripped off. I, till this day, think that Bob screwed him 10 ways from Sunday. And excuse my language there because of the fact that the youngsters, he messed them over. Let's put it that way. He messed him over. I want to put it as politely as possible because I've got some young listeners and viewers that do follow my stuff here and on my channel. So I don't want to have, any repercussions there. But sorry, parents. Yeah, the design is classic. It is what it is, and it's not going to change. Birdman is a very he's a government agent. He's a very unique character because he has powers that are never really explained. Unlike many of these characters, he just is. I mean, the government, the commander of the government comes on and calls him up, and he goes on these missions, and that's pretty much where it is. And he's a superhero for hire in the government agent status, and it's crazy how they actually did that. But they did it years and years and years before everybody else did, with Superman going to work for the president, and Batman being a civil servant, of the police department, and whatever else they tried to do in the spoof as well, because um, it's just what it was. But yeah, Birdman was actually one of the first superheroes to be clocked as an official uh, government agent, and that's part of what made him so cool was because of the fact that he was, definitely in the trenches, patriotic, part of the law. He was part of it, and um, that's where he was centered at. But yet, uh, there's little known about him. I mean, I've watched the series over and over and over, and there's little known about him as far as where his powers come from, where he got his abilities from, and whatnot. And he has these wings and has these power bands in his suit that give him um, the power of flight, obviously with the wings, and then you have those power bands, which pretty much everybody had in the '60s. It was explain away the ray gun, so give them power bands, and Space Ghost and Birdman and a couple of others had these power bands that they would use to fight crime, and it was always that type of thing. They had shields, they had pretty much anything you needed could come from those bands, and that's where it came from, and that's where it stopped and started right there. And I found that really, really interesting the way they just played that off and left it alone. Now you have to explain everything because the readership is a little more savvy, and that has a good thing and a bad thing to it, a good and bad angle to it, because of the way that now kids are so inundated with practicality. They have to have everything answered for them, and they have no imagination just to use a simple escape um, and enjoy the show. That is the downside to it. The upside to it is the fact that it has to be so well written now to even remotely come close. And then they just throw cartoons out there and burst that completely open and say, well, no, they don't, because they don't. A lot of I get tickled at the fact that all these cartoons are out there and they're just like, well, my cartoons rock, and it's just like, no, they don't. They're horrible. They're freaking horrible. So you got Spider-Man that doesn't explain anything anymore, except for the fact that Iron Man's basically found him, discovered him, and made him now, which goes by the movies, and that played into the from the original Ultimate Spider-Man series into the latest films, and then into now spinning off into the Spectacular Spider-Man reboot, and it's just bore me to death. But whatever works, I guess. I just hope that the cartoons pick up, because the kids that are out there today just don't have the same level of cartoons that we had, when I was a kid, even. And no, I'm not knocking it. Like I said, there's some funny stuff out there. The humor stuff is really good, but a lot of the comic cartoons, the hero stuff is just down in a dumpster right now. Um, it just died off, and we'll have to see what comes back out of it in the next generation, in the next 5 or 6 years. Hopefully, we'll get some good stuff. There's some really, really cool stuff coming out of Japan right now with the comic stuff. The X-Men, the Wolverine series was really good out of Japan. Um, Spider-Man India was interesting. Let's see, there was the Iron Man series, which looked phenomenal. It was a slow series, but it was really, really well written. You just had to give it a shot to get past the gate opening storyline and get into it to really enjoy it and get in there. Because the first couple of episodes were nothing but filler. It was just rough, and I mean rough. Um, it started out with I won't give you any spoilers or anything, but it started out with the robots that we see from Age of Ultron, where they're supposed to be like the Iron Man enforcers running around the world. That picked up right there, and showed them going crazy, and that opened the animated series for this the Iron Man show to take off and him to go to Japan and whatnot and live there and figure out why the robots went crazy, and that being the last source of his controlling the situation from the Stark base there. It's just nuts. And it got really good there for a while, and then they decided to shorten the series and stopped it with season 3. And now we're left open hanging with what's going on, but whatever. I mean, they'll make it work or they won't. We'll have to wait and see. But maybe we'll get another season out of it and they'll finish it up and go from there. The X-Men stuff got really strange. I love the look of that series, but the storyline in it is really, really drab and really dark. I mean, the X-Men have gone into hiding. The mutants of the world are hated. And it's basically the storyline that they pulled for The Gifted, where the X-Men have vanished. And there was a lot of the Age of Apocalypse type storyline and the Age of Future Past combined into a new storyline of itself. And, everybody was out, hated mutants. And if the government found out about it, they would kill you. And it was just, it was far-fetched. But, I mean, even for that stuff, it was far-fetched. And it was well-written, though. They handled it really well. And I liked it so far. But they're talking about another season of that coming out as well, which is going direct into the DVD set. So I'm hoping that they'll pick it up. But with Marvel and Disney tying up and killing everything off, and then the new movie line coming out through Fox, that's completely up in the air, man. We'll never know what they're going to let go and what they're not. Especially with the Deadpool franchise taking off and reopening the X-Men franchise. We'll have to wait and see. Of course, the bad thing with Fox is we have no idea what their continuity line is at all. But, it is what it is. It's Fox. It's always been that way. And it'll continue to be that way, unfortunately. So hopefully with the New Mutants coming out and Deadpool 2 coming out, hopefully they'll get some kind of continuity built up and go from there. But who knows? But as far as Birdman goes and this stuff, this has nothing to do with, as far as I know anyway, it has nothing to do with the Michael Keaton live action film. It just has to do with this character from the cartoons and from, whatnot, where it shows up. I did not like the Harvey Birdman lawyer series that the Cartoon Network had. I thought that was kind of disgraceful and distasteful to the original. Maybe I'm just too, too nostalgic about the original concept. Maybe I'm too much of a purist. I get called that all the time because I'm not a fan of. I'm a fan of positive change. If you got a good storyline going, I think it's great to change things up. But if you're going to manipulate something just for political purposes, of PR this or just to change it up and just to run with it a different way, to abuse a character because of the fact that you don't want to go with the original thread of what the character had, go make a new character. Don't jack the one I like up, because you want to go change something up. And I mean, I'm very picky about that. And I can say that without any kind of hypocrisy because of the fact that, I do the same thing in a lot of the characters that I use in Firestorm Comics because that is an original creation and adaptation of a lot of my characters are made up from public domain characters. And the reason is because of the fact that I wanted to bring them back and I love the characters in their original forms. However, that universe has its own timeline, so I have all of my own original creations in there as well, just as much as anybody else. So, make sure that you cover your bases and don't go jack stuff up just because you think you can and because you think you can get a quick funny out of it, because it's not necessarily going to make a fan base for you. Now, this badge is a little weird because it's got the Birdman wings which go up kind of like flags rather than actual wings. And I think they did that for expediency. But anyway, there are the wings on his nugget. And then he's got this badge right there. And we're going to leave that right there where it is, just as abstract as that, because I'm going to color that red and leave that alone because I don't want to mess with it. I don't want to mess it up. So I'm going to draw in these feathers here for the wing on this side. And put in those big 60s block feathers. And that's exactly the way I'm going to do this wing too. I don't want to mess that up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw in these big 60s wings with the feathers and the two big rows, and that's it, man. I am not messing with those too much because I want to keep it as simple as the original and hold on to that look for when I color it and ink it up for you guys. But yeah, I think it's going to be really cool to see what comes out in the next couple of years, especially with the Disney changeover. You know, with the comic thing changing up and seeing how everything goes with what DC is going to do and all the indie comics that I hear are coming out, including my own comics coming up. We're going to have to see how all that stuff plays out into the new evolution of the industry, because, you know, this thing's in its infancy. A lot of people are freaked out about that, but it doesn't bother me a bit, man, because I look at comics as still being in their infancy. You know, even though they've been around. Marvel and DC have been around since the 60s, you know, in this age. And, you know, we had the modern age in the late 70s, early 80s, the Silver Age right before that, from the 50s to the 60s, and the Golden Age prior to that, you know, the 30s when they were created all the way up to the mid 50s, early 60s, and had that play out. And I just think that there's a big thing coming up to where comics are going to have to change, and they're going to get a lot of exposure and get to open up again like they originally were, with all of the cool stuff of like all of the publishers that were around in the 60s. Because if you go back to pre-56, pre-54, there were over 120 different independent publishing companies out there for the brand market to go, okay, I'm cool, I like comics, and this is what I'm going to get. And that's what they did. And everybody published everything, and it all ran back into a distilled market because of the fact that, you know, the authority came in and all that crap, and everybody self-censored and ran out of business because they didn't have an in-house publishing site like Marvel and DC did. Marvel and DC switched to an in-house themed gallery of characters and started going from the anthology scene into the more finalized superhero genre and specific niche genre like love and war and, you know, all of that, where, you know, the famous Stan Lee interview where he talks about, you know, your romance, my romance, and our romance, and your love and my love, and his love and her love, and all that. And then, you know, Battlefield and Battle Battalion, and, you know, battle this, battle that, battle this, battle that, and war this and war that and war this. And all these things came about because of the fact that, you know, they were anthologies and it was fad stuff. And after the world wars were over, they had to come out with something really cool, you know, and to keep everybody in a patriotic mood of fighting onto the hook so that they could keep everything moving forward. So that's where they all went. They took it down in that direction. And that's how we ended up in the modern superhero age. But, you know, you got to think about all that stuff coming back. Those publishers, we need independent publishers. And it wasn't independent publishers back then. They weren't called independent because there was no mainstream. Comics were just magazines, period. They were just another genre of magazine, and that's all they were. And we need to get back to that and get away from this independent, mainstream differential crap and start publishing and buying up everything that we can as far as these things go to support the industry, period. So start thinking about that one on a broader scope and see where you're at whenever you come down to it next time, and think about it and say, well, I'm an indie publisher. I don't have to be mainstream, blah, blah, blah. It shouldn't matter, especially with the digital age. We should not matter with print on demand and custom fulfillment and, custom order from websites where you can have these things evergreen. Oh man, it shouldn't matter at all. It shouldn't matter. We should be all doing books and making money. But everybody wants to get, butt hurt by the fact that, oh, Marvel rejected my book. So what? It's join the 50,000 other people that had books rejected and go out there and produce your book. If it's decent, uphold a quality standard and get it out there. You know what I mean? So, keep on smiling, keep on moving, and get your stuff out there and get it going. And stop worrying about what everybody else is doing in the quote-unquote mainstream. But anyway, I'm about done here, so I will call this done for you guys, and drawing this little diaphragm here. Edging in the diaphragm so he can breathe. Looky there, he's got lungs. So anyway, we will call that done, and here is my tour from yesterday. So I hope you guys dig it. That's where we're at right now. That is the first couple for the Hanna-Barbera stretch. And I will see you guys tomorrow. And we'll have the next surprise character coming up to see what's going on. Talk to you then.